Elder Walker, you finished school. You got your degree in international relations, as I recall.
Yes.
And then, as I was reading the material to prepare for this, you started a whirlwind of moves over the next few years. You had a career in banking and investments.
Yes.
Tell us about your career and some of the places that you lived and some of the experiences that you had with that. And then, Sister Walker, what was your part in all this? How did you react to supporting him during this career and while you had your family? And what things can you do to maybe help others do the same if they're called on to do the same thing? Elder Walker, let's start with
Well, we graduated, or I graduated. She'd already graduated, and I was hired as a stockbroker in Vancouver, British Columbia. Being a Canadian, growing up in Canada, we went back to Canada, lived in Canada for a couple of years, and we kind of got homesick for grandparents and moved back to Salt Lake.
We had 2 children, though, in Vancouver.
Our first 2 children were born there.
In Canada. Okay.
Lived in Salt Lake for a couple of years, also in the stockbroker's business, and then I got hired by a company in California that was in the investment business, and we moved to California, lived there for 8 years, and our last 2 children were born there. Then my company transferred me to Atlanta, and I was transferred to Chicago, and we came back to Salt Lake, and then I was called as a mission president, and so we have been.
Did you just keep your bags packed all the time?
Well, it's you know, if you take 20 years, if you take 20 years and say that, it sounds like we couldn't keep a job and we were going everywhere. But you know, we were living 2 years and 3 years and 4 years in different places, and so
enough to unpack.
And she was great. Oh, yeah. She was always loving and supportive, and
I'm always up for an adventure, you know. But it gets old after a while. But you know, you never let the dust settle when you're doing that, because you're always thinking, oh, you might, you know, get a different job or anything like that. And I think that's the thing. You just have to really be prepared. I mean, I was always thinking ahead, trying to declutter and doing things like that, just so that when you do get called, you're ready. But we'd only been in Utah for 1 year before he got called to be the mission president.
Right.
And but then all of our kids went with us. So.
Now, you had all your children during this time of moving around. Was that hard on them to move around so much? Were there any challenges raising children with so many moves?
Well, you know, I think in a way it brings your children closer together. Some people think it's really hard and really difficult if you move, and it's hard. Some people think it's really hard on the children. But our experience was it draws your family closer together. Now, I'm not an advocate of moving every 6 months, but when we move,
because they have to rely on one another.
Yeah, that's right. And I think in some ways it makes the children closer to their mom and dad, and I think it helps to develop them. They have a broader view of the world, and see, our children have lived in Utah and California and Georgia and Chicago and Japan, and you know, they see the world a little bit differently than if they'd have just been raised and stayed in the same town their whole life. Now, Vicki lived her whole youth in Provo, and I lived my whole youth where I was, so it's not a bad thing. But I think if you have professional opportunities that are good for your family, to move is not a bad thing. And the other thing is, when you go different places, the Lord can use you. You can serve the Lord in a lot of different places. I served as a bishop in the San Francisco area when we lived there. I served as a bishop in Chicago when we lived there. When we lived in Atlanta, my wife served in the stake primary presidency. And so even though we'd moved, we had different experiences, and you can serve the Lord and you make new friends. And I think it's not a bad thing for children when the mom and dad take them somewhere else.
And they all had wonderful friends. I mean, each time we moved, that was the hard part, was to leave
their
friends, you know. But they're outgoing kids, and even the boys that were shy, you know, I think going on planes a lot and moving prepared them for missions. One son went to Tokyo, Japan. One went to Ukraine. The other one went to Tokyo. And I think the one son was just a very shy boy, but you know, he was one that was called to Kobe, Japan, and he just hit the ground running because we had forced him out of his comfort zone.
Right.
And so I think that, and then my one daughter, she said, Mom, I'm going to write a book sometime on all the different seminaries and institutes I went to, morning, afternoon, evening, by book, home study. Wow. So, you know, they did have their challenges.
All of it.
And a little hard to get the scouting stuff, you know, finished from time to time. But, you know, they all did it, and we didn't think anything different.
And it gave you, as you mentioned, an opportunity to serve in different capacities in different areas where the church is at different developmental stages.
Oh yeah, you felt needed.
You're needed,
yeah,
yes.
You really did.
I really believe that if we'll let the Lord direct our lives, He'll direct our lives and He'll get us where He wants us. And so part of that in my mind is you have to be open-minded. If there are professional opportunities that would take you somewhere else, you just have to get down on your knees and ask Heavenly Father if this is the right thing for us. Please help us that this will work. And I think that's what happened in our lives. We had experiences, and I had experiences both professionally and in church service that were unique and different because of the places we went and the places we lived, that I think have helped me to serve the Lord in the assignments that I now have. I really think the Lord was getting us where He wanted us, and we were having the experiences He wanted us to have to prepare us to continue to serve Him.